Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the NetOps Expert. Today, I am excited. You know me, Jeremy Rosbeck, Chief Technical Evangelist for Broadcom's Network Observability Solution, and I'm very excited to be joined today by Julian Guthrie. Now, Julian started her own company, an AI company called Alphy, and we'll get into that. But we wanted to have her on today to talk about what AI's impact may be on IT and how to find success in that arena, especially with the customers that she talks to. So, Julian, welcome to the NetOps Expert.
Thank you. Great to be talking with you.
Thank you. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your career, and what took you to the point of starting your own company?
Sure. So I'm a lifelong word geek. I became a journalist at the San Francisco Chronicle for 20 years, and I loved it. It was an amazing occupation. I parachuted into all worlds and gathered the facts. And it was really a heyday of journalism where there was truly unbiased, keep your opinions out of it, reporting journalism. So it was a super exciting time. And then I went on to write 5 nonfiction books. And it was around my 4th book, which was called Alpha Girls. It's about how women succeed in heavily male industries, that I began to think about something that would combine the best in human communication and the best in new technologies. And that was about 4 years ago. And so it was really, AI as we know it now was nascent. It was really at the beginning. We started out using what feels like the dark ages. We started out using BERT large and doing kind of brittle pattern matching. And so we have created an AI communication company looking at all types of harm in digital communication. And we're at a really exciting place, this inflection point where, how can AI be specialized rather than generalized? How can it be really useful and practical and tailored to solve certain pain points?
That's a good point, because I'll be the first one to say there's a lot of hype around AI right now. It's a great buzzword that everyone's attaching to. It reminds me of the days 7, 8 years ago when software-defined technologies were coming out and everyone was jumping on that bandwagon. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you started your company? What did you see the need for, and how you are helping customers really see some AI success?
So the story of Alphy is one of pivots. The story of my career is one that feels like or appears to be a pivot, but it's really a continuum. It's taking my love of language and my decades spent thinking about how we communicate, thinking about the power of words to help us or harm us, that led me really to want to create a technology that would be an ally to humans, using AI as an ally to help humans communicate in a safer, better way and to do less harm, if you will. So we started out, interestingly enough, with one label, and it came out of my book, Alpha Girls, which I referenced. And it was looking at diminishing language, in particular that was gendered, and what were the consequences for women versus men with diminishing language, and all of the qualifiers that we women can sometimes use in a way that is self-sabotaging or weakening in our communication. So literally I started with this list of like 167 diminishing terms and what would be the suggested alternatives. We began to bring it out to friendly potential customers, bring out our MVP, and we started to hear, what else can you detect in terms of harm? And I thought, well, we should do helpful and harmful. So we began with, looking at how to detect sentiment in our own way, as well as things like empathy and respect and confidence versus self-deprecating, timid, diminishing. And then we started to get into real areas of kind of, for companies at least, quantifiable harm, where you have EEOC protected classes, you have known discrimination in the workforce, and how do we detect all of what I call the isms: racism, ageism, sexism, classism, ableism? How do we create for a language model to really detect in real time, not after the fact, potential harm with all of these isms? And then when we started to bring it out to a range of companies across sectors, we zeroed in on heavily regulated industries, including financial services, or notably financial services, and really listening to the pain points that are unique to financial services with all of the really heavy regulatory environment. So we created proprietary training around unfair lending, which was really tricky to do. And it has helped us immensely to take our journalistic approach, which is you get an assignment and you do all the reporting you can and you talk to all the experts and you begin to then write. And we have written with our team, a former journalist like myself, and then on the tech side, super talented AI and tech people, but we've done all of our own training sentences and text. Now we have tens of thousands. It's one of my favorite things that I get to do, actually, which is too seldom as a CEO, as I'm doing all different things. But so we've created now over 40 labels detecting all types of harm, whether it is societal bias, whether it's bias, discrimination in the workforce, whether it's things like document tampering, antitrust, unfair lending, detecting covert communication for unapproved off-channel communication. And we've developed real specialties around this, real expertise, really through trial and error and being assiduous about it, literally writing these sentences, training texts every day for the last 3 years. And so now we have the capabilities to create these detection systems, these classifiers or agents, if you will, that are all in the 90th percentile in terms of accuracy detection. So it's really about the quality in, quality out approach that we've brought to it. So it's been a learning process, very difficult, very challenging, and super exciting.
Well, why don't we talk about, because you did mention financials, you have mentioned exactly at a high level what the product does and how it can help a lot of customers out there. But specifically, what would be a financial use case or maybe an education use case or other verticals where you see this helping your customers?
So 3 bank examples that I'll give, and these are, people often say, do people really say these things or write these awful things? Well, they do. So we worked with one bank that had an issue with a managing partner threatening, harassing a subordinate who happened to be a woman and typing, sending awful actual threats. I'm coming to burn your house down, certain things that I won't even say on this, calling her all sorts of names, saying things about her children. And they didn't have a threat detection capability except for way after the fact, which was months after these threats and this harassing had been taking place. So we said we can definitely do our own threat detection system in written communication, any sort of threat, particularly in the workplace. So we sit down and we define what a threat is. It is only bodily harm. Is it only to an individual? Is it to a group? And that's a part of our process. We've learned if we can't define something ourselves, then the AI isn't going to understand what we're asking it to seek out. So another example for another bank was they had some of their traders who were harassing a gay employee, and it became big front page news. So there's reputational damage to this very fine institution that had been around for a century. And so we can go in and we have detection real time, not just after the fact. We do provide the back end safety monitoring, but giving feedback in real time that this is anti-LGBTQ or whatever it may be. And these alerts go to surveillance and compliance right away. But we have another function within what we've built, which can integrate into Microsoft Outlook, Gmail, chat, etc., where the idea is to give people prompts to help them self-correct in real time. A lot of harm occurs because people are unaware that maybe you shouldn't comment on the person leaving for maternity leave and maybe shouldn't be hired, or things that people don't intend to be bad actors, but they may not know. So we give them a prompt, potential racial discrimination, or this sounds like document tampering or something, so they can self-correct. at the same time. Another incident was with another bank. You asked for, I think, three examples, or I'm giving three examples.
Mhm.
And that was around unfair lending. A division of a bank had been discriminating against Armenian Americans in lending. And so we said, let's look at unfair lending. Let's look at all the protected classes. We're already really good at protected classes and creating detection system around those, EOC protected classes, discrimination in the workforce. So we began to do all the reading of all of the laws, the amendments, the Fair Housing Act, the Equal Opportunity Credit Act, the amendments to the amendments. And so we have since created really a first of its kind real-time detection system for unfair lending. So those are some examples, very easy to integrate and very high accuracy that we've gotten. And we've kind of come up with this formula for how to do these labels pretty quickly and with high accuracy and with a lot of human training, but also now adding some very specialized synthetic training with human supervision to the mix. It's a recipe.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And you're always kind of playing with the ingredients, right, to get it exactly the way you want. And we'll come back to that when I mention the word ingredients again. But it sounds like some of the use cases you've already talked about, especially in the verticals that they're in, is really a mechanism to protect the enterprise that's using your data. So they can protect their brand, they can protect their revenue, obviously, so they can deliver exceptional customer experiences to anyone and everyone that has the ability to use their service. But what if I asked you the use cases that are possible outside of the enterprise? So, you and I both know every word that you put out there is scrutinized nowadays, especially on social media. But how would something like this, is it possible to use something like this or this technology outside the business world and maybe looking out for threatening messages at schools? What about the use in psychiatry or mental health? Have you thought about any of this?
Absolutely. The world has spell check, the world has grammar check, and we are harm check. So we want to be checking for harm everywhere people write. We want to be ubiquitous. So whether that's on social media, whether it's threat detection for schools, we've augmented our training for threats in the workplace, for threats in the broader environment, including around schools. So we definitely see applicability across industries. Our first kind of tailored vertical was for financial services, but we can do the same thing, tailoring for supply chain or medical or retail or tech or sports, etc. We do have this generalized classifier that we have built that doesn't exist anywhere else, that can be applied anywhere, through APIs, through different integrations. So we're talking with some potential partners now about, how do we get this everywhere so that harm in communication is mitigated, and there's an elevated awareness around the damage that can occur, as well as my North Star is how we can communicate more effectively as humans, how we can connect. Communication is something that is magical, and we're trying to use AI to wrap the AI brains around trillions of human utterances, and the nuances of language are fascinating and still rely on human training, human specialty. Fortunately, humans are still way ahead in understanding communication and thinking about communication and communicating over AI. So the AI is not overtaking us in this realm.
It's funny you mentioned, I totally agree with you. We're built for connection, all of us, whether we know it or not. And unfortunately, because what's written or spoken in today's society, that connection gets broken so much. And listen, I instantly, as a father of two girls who grew up with social media and all the negative consequences that come from that, I see and am very excited to see any type of this technology be a potentially altering mechanism for teenagers to not be so scrutinized every minute of every day. When you and I were in school, there was nothing like this. You took out your grievances in person. So it's exciting. And I have my oldest daughter as a school teacher. So you can see why I brought up some of those use cases outside of the enterprise.
A lot of the technology that's being used to detect harm, as by way of example, is really antiquated. It is still using, pattern matching, dictionary, lexicon based, and ours we've trained to have much better contextual understanding. So reduce the false positives and make sure that we're elevating real alarms, real instances of potential harm. And the value prop for individuals is clear. Advance yourself. Don't set yourself back with harmful communication. And for companies, U.S. companies alone spend $1.4 trillion each year on litigation stemming from harmful, unlawful communication. So there's a clear value proposition for companies across industries.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny because you gave me the perfect segue. While we haven't mentioned networks yet, I asked Julian to come on, not only because it's amazing and wonderful and so exciting to see a female in a position like this, where not only does she start her own company, but she starts her own AI company, which is pretty exciting. But you talked about contextual data, right? And from that, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you're speaking about it in your examples, that would be like the various ways something can be said or written. So it doesn't have to match a specific pattern. It's smart enough to look for inflections of that word or differences of that word. Is that right? Or sentences?
Right. So you have to write positive sentences and adversarial sentences or text. Positives is something that if we're writing about sexism, it has to represent that you do declare it as positive for something that is potentially sexist, and adversarial is something where you may be using some of the same words, but contextually it understands that it shouldn't be flagged as sexist. Early on, when we were doing our training to really simplify things, we would, if we were speaking of African Americans or Black people, and doing training around this, you have to differentiate so the AI knows not to flag something when you're writing about a Black car that is amazing. So that's kind of in its most simplistic terms. And we had these same issues early on with things like Chinese food, and it was taking it as a nation of origin potential infraction. So a lot of lessons learned along those lines in terms of how to generate high quality data.
Yep.
Something I think it's on everyone's minds in this field.
I'm so glad you brought it up. Because I want to bring this full circle, selfishly, back to tech and networks. So you mentioned data, contextual data, various kinds of data to allow the engine to quickly infer what is good or what is bad without getting stuck in any type of pattern recognition. You also mentioned talking about designing the AI engine with good data in, so it produces good results out. Good data in, good answers out, bad data in, bad answers out, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk about this. So for those folks who are listening to this, you'll get it. For those folks who are watching this, you'll really get it. So like I always say, I'm at home. I'm in Maryland. I'm on my home Wi-Fi. I'm going through Verizon Fios as my residential ISP, and God knows how many other ISPs, until finally I get into Google Cloud, where Julian and I are having this recorded session. She is not on the East Coast, across the country, won't say where, but far enough away that obviously she's using home Wi-Fi. She's using a completely different ISP than me, going through completely different network routes to get to this same instantiation of this recording studio in Google. So our network paths to do the use cases that Julian mentioned when you're typing and you're interacting with the AI engine that her company has developed, and it's giving responses back to you, that's all done over that network path that I just told you about. If I had the software on my laptop now and I started typing and using it, it would be using every single network device I just mentioned in that network path, from my home Wi-Fi through Verizon all the way out to Google Cloud, and sending information back. So what if I have an issue on my home Wi-Fi network? What if Verizon is dropping a couple packets here and there, and I am typing something that is not kosher, and for some reason there was a blip in network performance, maybe even with Verizon, and the engine didn't give me the feedback it should have given me at that time in order to make sure I didn't make a mistake like that. And these are the impacts or the recommendations when talking about AI initiatives and how to prepare your IT infrastructure to find AI success. As I just long and drawn out talked about that use case of what the infrastructure is behind what's making AI work, what are some of the technical requirements you expect from the customers that you talk to in order for them to see success with your solution?
So there's a lot there. And so we've integrated with Microsoft Outlook and Teams and Gmail. And so we can also be headless, and which is where we want to go, because as you're saying, there's so many interlocking pieces you're connected to and reliant on, the more probability there is for a potential error or failure. When Microsoft pushes an update to Outlook, how is it going to affect our add-in Reflect AI integration? And this is, how's it going to affect the latency? We need these responses to be in real time. What you said, what if there is a delay? What if there is a stoppage? What does it mean for when we're detecting harm in real time? So there's that. There's figuring out ways to minimize our reliance on other technologies. Even we've trained our classifiers to date largely on OpenAI's ChatGPT 3.5 or 4 now, but we are also now kind of like a jockey where we can jump on other horses, and meaning with the different language models that are open source, that are smaller, that can be on-prem, to minimize our reliance on an external, whether it's an OpenAI or whether it's a Microsoft, and become as headless as we can be, so that we add to that reliability. But right now we're dealing with all of those things, with our reliance on Microsoft and on Google and on the servers and on OpenAI and on the network performance and speed. And
a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts. So it's really continually figuring out how to, again, minimize those interactions that would create a shutdown or a problem for us. One of the things that, especially with the banks that we're dealing with, is, AI and, communication securities. Their communications are their most valuable, among their most valuable assets and most closely guarded. So being compliant, going through all of the SOC 2 and et cetera certifications, all of the PIN testing. There are a lot of security requirements that we have to go to with the compliance and with AI now. So it's figuring out, again, what is the interoperability? It's really key. That is, that's kind of going to the heart of what you're talking about, which is how do we interact and operate successfully with all of these different pieces. And I know this has been the case since the beginning of time. No technology has existed in a silo. We're all reliant on one another to do better. But it's something we're working on continually and finding better ways to do this. And is it on-prem with smaller models? There's been a push to bigger language models, and we find we can have just about the same levels of accuracy with smaller models that can be more portable and more on-prem and less risky. And then it doesn't have to go back to OpenAI. We have end-to-end encryption, but there's always potential vulnerabilities. So if it can be entirely on-prem with a smaller language model with the same accuracy levels, we're looking at that as well.
So you bring up a good point. Yeah, you bring up a good point, because I would expect, especially large AI initiatives, to be housed on-prem, just because, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't look like your solution, from what I've seen, sends a large amount of data across the network constantly to do its computations. It's rather small. Is that correct?
Well, we're getting there where, because we're onboarding with some big banks, where the hits will be significant and the
Okay.
scaling will be significant. And thinking about the costs with the tokens and thinking about the latency issues and the immediacy. These
Yep.
are all things that are before us. And I'm most focused. Our engineering team is very focused on that. And I'm thinking the most about quality data and how do we continue to create high quality data, which I think there's a lot of talk about kind of the end of times with AI and the energy consumption. Is it good or bad? AGI, is it going to help us or harm us? Is it close by? But I'm thinking about, the language models we have to date, that are getting bigger and bigger, have up until now largely scraped the internet from Wikipedia and YouTube captions. And it's really, though, only as smart as the inputs. And so how do you continue to create really high quality human generated data with specialized synthetic training? So that's one really key piece. Like if you don't have a high quality, people can make all sorts of things with Gen AI, and asking the Gen AI to create a classifier around something. But the accuracy numbers are typically in the 50 to 60% percentile accuracy detection. So we know that human supervision is still required. There's a lot of kind of myth making around the capabilities of AI, but if you're in it every day, you see how it really requires great human supervision. And then it does great things. It can extrapolate out from our existing training in really phenomenal ways, but it still needs a lot of hand-holding, nudging, revisions, and work there. But it's really exciting, and for me to think about how humans can improve AI. We need human intelligence to improve the models, and then how AI can help humans communicate better on the other side of it. We're at a dazzling time where we're enabled in a way that we never have been before. And I think where humanity really needs it more than ever. I mean, you think about how polarized our communication is. We won't get into the recent presidential election, but
for those folks who are listening to this, you can visualize that I just rolled my eyes when we talked about what's going on in the news lately.
Yes, but you think about how language has been kind of a race to the bottom in the public discourse of late, and what happened to civility, what happened to constructive communication. So that's where I see we're at a great place, and we at Alphy are in a really, really exciting position there to affect change in a really positive way and to be a part of this dialogue around what AI is capable of.
And I brought you on because not only do you have a wonderful story, but as I consistently preach to the listeners out there, tech and IT and especially networks, they're kind of thought of after the fact. So you want to write really good data that delivers insightful, output with the right classifiers and all that. And that's wonderful. But the fact is that if you write good data, but then I deliver it to the person who requested it, but I had a horrible map to get to that person. The directions weren't there. The delivery mechanism needs to be as robust and resilient as the data you're writing in the AI engine, because it would be all for nothing if we didn't deliver exactly what you wrote from a data standpoint or output standpoint from the AI engine. So as I always do, it's great to look ahead at these amazing and aggressive and sometimes disruptive technologies, but we have to be able to build a foundation for them to prove what they say they're going to do. So I think I mentioned this to you before, and I've definitely said a lot on this podcast. I recently requested a image generator to give me two guys sitting on a sofa with a hoodies and sunglasses on, looking all punky and badass. And I got back two guys sitting on a sofa with hoodies and sunglasses. One looked like he got in a car wreck, and the other had 8 fingers on his hand. Now, is that bad data? that the AI engine was used to answer my prompt, or was there latency on the network? Again, we talked about a lot of people may install this solution on-prem, but that doesn't mean the person asking the prompt for that on-prem solution isn't halfway around the world. And still, network latency in ISP and cloud provider networks that none of us own could be the culprit in you not getting a valid response or an expected response from the AI engine that has been built with such robust data.
Absolutely. And this is where, companies like Broadcom come in and providing this architecture that's all important. And how do we innovate around that too, in new ways with the new technology that is AI? How do we continue to improve? How do we make the LLMs or the classifiers or the agents, whatever, or the guardrails? How do we make them smaller and more efficient and more seamless in their delivery and quicker in their delivery? And I think we'll get there. That's the story, the dazzling tale of the history of innovation. But when you think about the delivery, we all have reliability. We rely on others to get our product to market. And when I was writing books, it was, I could write this great story, and I would do all the reporting, and I would interview all the people, all the folks, and I'd spend so much time on it. But if I didn't have the agent, and then the editor, and then the publisher, and then the distributor, and then the marketing head, and then the actual brick and mortar stores in some case, or the online. There are parallels there to my previous life. Where we all have this reliability on one another, and we need to have, great conversations. What are your needs? What are your capabilities? What's missing? What's lacking before we have breakdowns and meltdowns? Because again, I could write a great story, but if I don't have all of those other pieces, it's not going to get into the world. We've created a great AI. And now, if we're reliant on a system that breaks unbeknownst to us, then we can't get it there.
You beautifully talked about the point I always try to make on every podcast. It's, make sure everything in the foundation is in place so you can see the success with the investment you made. So for those folks who know, a few weeks ago, I was at the AI Networking Summit in New York City, sponsored by ONUG, Open Networking User Group. And this is where I met Julian. And of course, like the name and my T-shirt, if you're watching right now, the AI Networking Summit took on a new talk track around what AI's impact will be on the network. So real quick, Julian, not sure if you've ever been to a tech conference like that before, but I know you were on a panel discussion. I watched it. Can you tell me a little bit about what you were looking to get out of that show and what you did walk away with?
I was really interested in hearing first the terminology, like where people are going with AI, whether it's a Broadcom or an HP or a Cisco or some of those companies. So I was really listening and hearing again and again some terms, agent is a big one, or agentic AI, guardrails is another one. And kind of listening and seeing what the offerings were. So I loved that. HPE did, Hewlett Packard Enterprise did. They built this avatar of their CEO. I don't know if you had a chance to kind of play with that.
Yes, it was so awesome.
Yeah, it was. It was like, the early Star Wars hologram come to life.
Yeah.
But so they fed in all of the publicly available speeches that their CEO had made, or talks about different products. And the challenge was, and this is where the guardrails come in, where I was thinking where our Alphy AI could even play a role is, I asked the CEO's avatar, who are you voting for in the upcoming election, to see? And the guardrail kicked in and said, that he is not able to answer this question.
Nice.
So there are specific guardrails, like we set guardrails around harm. You could also set guardrails around not talking about politics, because that could get a CEO in trouble. But a lot of people I know were going up there to try to test it, like, what's your favorite ice cream, or who do you love the most in life, and things like that. So it was really interesting to get this sense of, what leaders in the industry are focusing on right now. And it's this move toward agents or agentic AI, and guardrails, needing the guardrails, and moving into more siloed AI that is more personal and tailored to specific needs. Gen AI came out and OpenAI made the big splash, and it's phenomenal, but it's really good for everyone and great for no one yet. And that's where we go next, with really specialized, tailored AI trained in a certain way, solving a certain known problem for enterprises, SMBs, and even individuals like college students, high school students, and so on.
Yeah, I completely agree with the fact that trying to boil the ocean with something this disruptive, we've tried it in the past with new technology. It's probably never the case. So let's learn from small instantiations, like you mentioned, very specific use cases, learn from that, and then build out and get bigger and bigger. I have one more question, and I'm going to ask you to plug a lot of what is happening in your life that folks can go to and read and learn more. You're a woman, you're in tech. Any advice for others out there, especially the recent graduates, the 20-somethings that are thinking about a tech job, and especially the women out there? Tell them a little bit how you succeeded and what to always keep in mind.
So my book, Alpha Girls, was about a group of women who managed to succeed in this heavily male industry of tech and venture capital. And so I learned a lot from their stories. And obviously I live this now, so it's different living it than writing about it. I hope to write about what I've lived through this experience as well. I would say everyone has imposter syndrome. It doesn't matter what your gender is. It is over prepare. I think that's something that women tend to do. In particular, it is specialize in something. It is always being curious, always asking questions. We have one mouth and we have two ears, and we're supposed to listen a lot. That's a great way to communicate. It's at the ONIG conference, going back to that, it was a great conference and a lot learned, and really, really impressive people and offerings. And a lot, at that conference, at other conferences I go to, you really notice that there are too few women. And that's something that I hope to be a part of correcting. And there are really dynamic women who are limited or are inhibited because they don't, you can't be what you can't see. And if they don't see enough women in tech, in like this urgency right now to get more women in AI, I cannot overstate that is really key, as this next technology that will shape how we all live. If we don't have inputs from everywhere, then you get a continuum, you get a lot of sameness. And we know, going back to, data, is it has to be specific, but it also has to be diverse. We have to have many, many voices in there. And so getting more women in AI and in tech and in leadership roles is critical. So for the men out there, be great allies. And, there are all sorts of ways that you can do that. And women also need to be better lifting up other women. So it's something that we have to continue to really focus on and make efforts in our daily lives. If it's having, a woman CEO on your podcast, then, that gets, adds to the visibility. And if it's, you're planning an offsite for your company and you decide to do golf and whiskey tasting and flag football, you might want to reconsider that and do something that feels more inviting to all genders. So there are things, big and small that companies can do and that individuals can do. And again, I wrote a whole book about that, and I love to talk about it. And it's so important. And some of my greatest mentors have been men. Really fantastic to this day, because it's lonely. It's really lonely being in a solo CEO. And I try to connect with also young women coming into AI or into tech, and they feel like imposters. I talked with a dynamic woman last night, and she's brilliant. I'm like, do not underestimate yourself. Get out there. You are incredible. So again, it's you can't be what you can't be. So let's make sure there's more visibility.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Wonderful advice that maybe all of us could think about. Listening, right? Supporting our women, hearing other people's opinions, respect. We could use all of that nowadays. All right, Julian, I want to thank you so much. It really has been a pleasure to meet you and talk to you and get to know you. What would you like to plug? I know you have a handful of books out there, and I know people would obviously want to know more about the Alphy company and website. So what would you like to plug?
So Alphy is spelled ALPHY. Our website is alphyco.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn. Connect with me. We are bringing our technology to not just banks and financial institutions, but across sectors. And for small to medium-sized businesses, super easy solution to plug in, and working with enterprises of all sorts to really, again, be the best in harm detection of any company that is out there today. And then books, you can look me up for my books, 5 of them. I spent a year interviewing Larry Ellison, the co-founder of Oracle, did a book on a private race to space, spent a lot of time focusing on Peter Diamandis, interviewed Elon Musk, and then Alpha Girls. And I always tackle underdog stories. I think we all have an element of underdog, and I always gravitate to the underdogs of the world. I'm definitely one, as this just, as a little girl who loved words and language, and now look where it's taken me. It's pretty exciting. So it's a message in kind of following your passion and what you're good at, and you'll keep opening doors. So I'm grateful for the time here, and really good to meet you as well.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you on, especially with the uplifting, positive story you're telling and the message you're putting out there. You're living it. So it's always good to see that. And it's always good to promote it as well. So Julian, again, thank you so much for joining me today. I will put all of her book titles as well as the Alphy website in the show notes on Apple and Spotify, as well as YouTube. And that's going to be it for us. I hope everyone has a wonderful week, and I can't wait to see you again on the next episode of The NetOps Expert.